everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Decatur Download. I am your host, editor, and founder, Dan Wisenhunt. Decatur Download is Decatur's home for nuanced hot takes and level headed commentary. Today, we are joined by our education reporter and first time guest, Jim Bass. Jim, how are you?
Hello, everyone. I'm doing well.
Hey,
Yeah, excited to be here.
I'm excited to have you here, Jim. And we're also joined by Jess Cino with Save Decatur Schools. Jess, how are you?
I'm doing great tonight. Thanks.
Thank you for both for joining us, and thank you to everyone who's watching us right now. We got a great room full of people already. If you have questions for Jim or Jess, please let us know in the comments, and we will answer them to the best of our ability. I want to give you a quick programming note. We did invite a representative from City Schools of Decatur to join us tonight. We invited them multiple times. They declined, and that's why they're not represented here tonight. But if they want to join us at some point, they are welcome to do so. Tonight's show is brought to you by Pastries A Go Go in Decatur, and we'll learn more about them in just a bit. So I want to get started and just, Jim, bring us up to speed because you have been covering this for several weeks now. You've been to all the board meetings, you've been to the protests. What are we talking about here? What is the Early Childhood Learning Center and what is the school closure discussion? And how are the two things related?
So basically, this is a multi-year conversation here. I'm going to sum it up as quick as I can. But the City Schools of Decatur bought the property that the ECLC will potentially be going on in 2017. It's been green space ever since. It's right across the street from the Wilson Center, off Electric Avenue. It wasn't until August 2024 when there was a more big announcement of when it's coming. Construction fall of 2025. It was set to be out in 2027 for students to be in. It was seen as a really big priority for pretty much all of the staff and board. When they had come in, it was a big priority for them to get accomplished in the strategic plan. And then they had a January community meeting scheduled. Middle of January. That ended up getting snowed out. It was actually done virtually, but the in-person part was not done. And then, it was kind of discussed a little bit more, but April rolls around. And when it was kind of about to kind of be revamped, or not revamped, but kind of brought up again in a big way, the equity policy conversation came up when they had rescinded a lot of the board's equity policies. Or districts equity policies. And obviously, you might remember parent got carried out of that meeting. It was a very tense situation. Yes. So it was actually directly after that is when the first construction, like CMAR, was approved. It was right after that incident.
What is the CMAR for those in our audience who might not know?
Construction Management at Risk Service. It's kind of the lead into getting construction underway. It's simple terms. I mean, I'm not huge in the whole contract stuff, but anyways, so that happens. Community meeting happens in April, but instead of talking about the ECLC and the budget, they're talking about equity policy and the budget. So it kind of gets back up to June when it's dropped in June. It's the summertime. There's not a lot of people in the area. The whole plan drops. There's designs. It's like a $22 million at the time, I believe $23 million now, plan. The city commission didn't get to approve whether it was happening or not because apparently the zoning, they didn't get to decide on whether the zoning was all up to code or not because I believe there was a stipulation there. Anyways, July they're off for board. And then plans refined in August. They pitched a 2-story plan, didn't work out because it was way more money. And then in September, nearly being finalized. And then October rolls around, and they start talking about school consolidation. Let's
pause here and note that election qualifying had happened at that point. And so a lot of this discussion got kicked off after election qualifying happened. And all of the school board members who were running, well, there was one open seat, but they all ran unopposed. And I just wanted to point that out for people who might be watching. I'm sorry to interrupt, Jim.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, if you have anything, I like go for it. But yeah, October, the school consolidation process conversation starts. It's in the agenda items before the meeting, talking about closing a school, talking about potentially closing a school, talking about a letter maybe going out to parents a few days after, which was kind of not the case apparently to the meeting. Community was outraged. They all came out in support. A lot of people were wearing their school's colors on. It was a very tense meeting as well. And then November and December, they kind of backed off that. And now I believe it's November 2026 until that gets done, completed, and like their decisions are potentially made from the committees that they have formed since all of the community backlash. Yeah, and then the ECLC is basically validated with a PFA now. Even
Public Facilities Authority is what Jim's talking about there.
Yes,
it's a creature, and I'll jump in. So the Public Facilities Authority was created by the legislature for the city of Decatur to buy the United Methodist Children's Home, which is now called Legacy Park. And the school board used the PFA to borrow the $50 million plus that they need to do this ECLC and all these projects at the high school.
Yeah. One more point of note, and then I'll pass it back on. But kind of the Early Childhood Learning Center is supposed to see 150 students, 50 of which are from the Decatur Housing Authority, and that would be paid. And that was a big point of note for the board and staff, is to get this built to kind of help with that equity gap that they are struggling with and continue to struggle with. Although there have been slight improvements in the past. So that's kind of another reason.
I don't know why, but I feel the need to say this at the outset of this conversation. Everyone here cares about equity in schools. Nobody here is opposed to that. I feel obligated to say that. Jess, talk to us about Save Decatur Schools. What is your group?
Sure.
And why was it formed?
Yeah, it was sort of, I will say, an almost an overnight process. For many of us, we found out through an article in Decatur-ish that even closing a school was on the table. I remember it distinctly. It was Friday night that I got the link, and by the next morning, there were a bunch of parents sort of texting back and forth. That group mushroomed into a larger group chat, and I think by Sunday night there was a core, very large group of people on a Zoom call trying to figure things out. Somebody already created a domain, and we knew that organization and swift organization would be the key to fighting back, really, because I think we were broadsided by the information, and also looking at what was potentially the timeline, because by that point the board had posted their agenda. We were able to see it, kind of look at it a little bit, and the timeline that they were presenting to consider a possible school closure start to finish was immensely fast. I mean, it was, I think, 7-8 weeks from start to finish of letting people know that a school was going to be closed, public hearings, and boom, kind of wipe their hands clean and we're done. And it certainly rang of, okay, we don't really expect significant community pushback. Everybody's going to kind of just do what we tell them to, and we'll be okay with this, and we're going to be done with it. And so, our group sort of organized, decided, divided up roles, figured out, who's going to do what. I think the biggest thing we realized was there's not enough information out there, and there's a lot of gaps in information. And why now? What's the problem that's trying to be solved? Why is a school closure even on the table? And so part of that effort obviously included having a lot of people show support, sending letters to the board, sending emails to the board, making statements, getting a large media response, which of course is always very helpful. But then the other facet of that was starting to make open records requests to try to understand sort of where this came. It seemed it came out of nowhere. And later, in some listening sessions with various members of CSD, they claim that it came up through like some community meetings and stuff, but once you have a whole bunch of parents now listening to every single board meeting going back 2 years, then you start to find like different nuggets that are sprinkled throughout to try to connect the dots effectively.
And let's pause real quick to acknowledge that we have quite a few people in our room, probably the most we've ever had for an episode of the show. So if you're all watching us live, welcome. You can ask our guests comments. So please do ask our guests questions. Excuse me. Please do so in the comments. Jessica, talk to me about this records request. Why did you ask for the things that you asked for, and what things did you learn when you got the response? And how much did it cost? Because I just want to compare notes, because I want to make sure they're charging everybody the same thing.
Yeah. So, you know, my background, I'm a lawyer, and I've done records requests for a variety of reasons and in a variety of different cases. I've litigated against, for example, the Trump administration, and I've done death penalty cases. So, you know, things like open records requests, GPI files, those types of things are incredibly important to that work. And so making records requests is usually that background information you need if there's not a lawsuit currently pending, which is, and I want to make a distinction because you get different documents in open records requests than you do in discovery of a lawsuit. It's much more limited what you get in open records requests because they can redact things, they can hold, the government entity you're requesting from can hold things back for certain purposes, whereas in litigation, you can get a lot more documents through your discovery requests, through depositions, like you can have people under oath, for example, which you can't do with open records requests. So with open records requests, you know, part of it was, okay, is a specific school a target, like Westchester? Were they looking to close it? Were they looking to lease it? Were they looking to sell it? We knew probably the most significant thing we wanted to see were text messages. We knew the board communicated a lot on WhatsApp. I will say we still haven't gotten any WhatsApp messages. That we wanted to see emails. So the communications part of the open records request was a big deal. And then we knew that this group called the Consultant Education Planners had been brought in to do what? We weren't necessarily sure. So getting their contract, what the scope of that agreement looked like, what the communications were with them, and what, you know, what had been given to education planners, what were they tasked with doing? Were in fact they, you know, told to basically, hey, we want you to close a school, tell us how to get there. All of those things are sort of the pieces that we were looking for, at least breadcrumbs we thought might be out there. So it was a fairly large, encompassing records request. I originally dated it like for I think I went back to July of 2023 just to cast a wide net. They came back, I think, with a $23,000 bill for that.
So it's not just us. Okay.
Which I've done a lot of records requests. I have never seen, I mean, granted, asking people to data mine like text messages and stuff is a little bit of a different game, but I haven't quite ever seen a bill that high. So I refined it. I went back and forth with CSD's lawyers, and we got that bill down to like $1,700 or like $1,750 or something. I can't remember the exact amount, but still pricier than I have ever in my life paid for open records. And we sort of crowdsourced, and a lot of people contributed to that effort for fundraising for it, which was very cool. And it took a long time. And I got the runaround a few times of, oh, we're going to get you documents by this date, and we need 30 business days. So that doesn't include weekends, and that doesn't include holidays. And I'm like, I've never even heard of that system of like adding up days before. And then finally, at the end of December, we started really getting, of course, over holiday break, which seemed very convenient. You know, we started getting like an influx of documents, like, you know, maybe twice a week and in bulk fashion. And there was one day like we got like 550 documents on like one day or something. And so it was trying to like marshal a bunch of people, and they were amazing about it. And we were all just scanning through documents, trying to read things as fast as possible and seeing what we had in there.
Well, hearing about a records request fight warms my crusty journalist heart. What were some of the highlights of what you got in the records request, Jess?
Yeah, I would say, so some of the highlights, obviously there was discussion about how could the school board, and I want to be very careful about how this is stated because the school board is a little prickly about the exact words of the records. How could they perhaps pay back the bond that didn't include increasing taxes? So, for example, in a text thread between Chair Sultan and I think Lisa Meyer, who was one of our commissioners at the time, Commissioner Meyer had said, she was not very supportive of ECLC at the price tag that it was at. And I think Chair Sultan then came back to her and said, these are the reasons why, and we may not necessarily have to raise taxes to pay for the bond. And something we could do is look at closing a less crowded school to help pay for, and it's basically implied to help pay for the bond, sort of a cost savings analysis, if you will. So that was one of the ones that was kind of obviously showing that linkage there between closing a school and paying for, finding a way to monetize closing a school to help with the bond payments. And then there was another one between Dr. Jana Johnson Davis, and she was speaking with somebody who had some ideas for what happens, if they were closing a school, could you do it as an alternative school or something else? And the board member responded and said, well, we're looking at whatever building we close to make income off of that. Now, nothing in there says sale, so I want to make that abundantly clear, which the board keeps kind of harping on, but there are a variety of ways to make income off of a building that is closed. You could rent it or do other things that doesn't involve a sale. And the parents very early on got a copy of the deed to see that they couldn't necessarily, that the CSD could not sell Westchester outright because it's actually the city that owns the land that Westchester sits on. From a legal perspective, could that land still be sold off? Yeah, the proceeds would go to the city and maybe something goes to CSD because of the building or improvements on it. I don't know.
Jim, what was the school board and the City Schools of Decatur saying about all this before these records became public? What was their position on the closures, and what was the position on whether or not this was connected to the ECLC?
Sorry. Was it me? Was it?
It was to Jim, but if you want to weigh in on that.
I'm totally sorry. I wanted to say there's one more thing that was in that set, and that was a draft letter to parents of Westchester saying your school, we've decided your school's closing and there's going to be public hearings. There was not a draft letter for any other school in there. It was just Westchester. The draft letter had been prepared by education planners. It was sent to the board. It was sent to the superintendent. And I believe the email to the superintendent is, here's the letter from our discussion yesterday. So there's definitely a discussion about it.
There's a discussion happening. Jim, pick up the trail. What were they saying publicly about all of it?
Well, first off, I do want to mention, Jess mentioned that in the community meetings, kind of in the springtime, it was during budget talks. They did actually discuss maybe closing a K2 school in the future. They didn't say when or what school necessarily, but they said the community should potentially be prepared for that conversation being had. I believe it's Hans Utz who said that, vice chair. I feel like that is something I should definitely mention as a point, but They definitely were very adamant that they had no connect. The ECLC and the school closures had no connection at all, and that there was no like consideration being made of them being coincided or not coincide. I don't know if coincide because they use the word coincide, but basically they were saying they were not linked at all.
Yeah, it was just sort of inconvenient. We did this at the same time. Sorry, should have thought about that.
So, Jim, as you know, Jess Cino and her group made a video and put it on the internets. It made the rounds, and all of this stuff started coming to light. How did the school board react to that?
Well, it kind of they reacted. They very much doubled down on what they were kind of saying in the first place. Board Chair Sultan said it. I know Board Member Tracy Anderson kind of made it a point to be like, this wasn't the board saying this was the board chair after her speech. But on Tuesday, Board Chair Carmen Sultan kind of went after the video in a way where it was one of those things where she kind of defended their transparency. I know she had sent in her previous statement about the video that she was very adamant about supporting the ECLC and said, I mean, you can look at my text messages. I mean, I obviously support the ECLC. There were some things that weren't addressed. She did mention the text messages. One thing I found interesting was she had kind of gone after the video for saying that it was the education planner's letter and not the district's letter, which had Westchester Elementary written down in the document. But I can give a few quotes as well. Just very much like, this is just a piece of the story, not the whole piece, like not the whole entire thing. Like we haven't done any illegal or unethical activities. We're not doing anything deliberately trying to like mislead the community. Just very defending, very much defending their stance, and not really saying anything else other than those.
We got some viewer questions, so I want to get to those. But first, I want to let you know that our sponsor, Decatur's favorite breakfast spot, is now serving espresso. After 30 years, Pastries A Go-Go has finally added espresso drinks. So their incredible biscuits and pastries can be paired with a really good latte. Pastries A Go-Go, fresh baked, now perfectly brewed. And you will know, 20,000 Decatur's readers recently voted Pastries A Go-Go the best breakfast and brunch in Decatur and first runner-up for best bakery. And on a personal note, I've invested quite a lot of my money in that place over the years. It is a delight. Got the best biscuits in town, I think. So if you want to support a business that supports us, please go check them out. They're in downtown Decatur. So Ben is in our chat, and he asks, what grade, Jess, would you give the district for its preparation, including how it utilized education planners for the initial K-12, K-2 utilization work?
Yeah, I think they're gonna have to get an F for that because their sheer kind of lack of communication, and because I went to all the meetings and the education planners group didn't seem to know what they were doing. And then, first of all, the timeline that they put out, nothing was followed on their timeline that they put on the district website. The content that was on the website was incorrect and had to constantly be corrected. Then at the meetings, education planners didn't seem to know what they were doing or how they were going to run the meetings. And then they pivoted and said, well, we're going to form these committees. And they formed the committees, people sort of self-selected where they went. And then the committees we've never really heard about again. I think education planners might be even out of the window. Again, we're not sure because there's no announcements, no information. And now the committees are sort of being added to. I don't think they're being reshuffled, but they're being added to by other community members because they were too Westchester heavy, which I'm not sure how they know that because nobody actually put down information about what school their children went to when they signed up. I guess maybe they just know our faces from me showing up at other things or something. So the entire process is still, in a lot of ways, kind of opaque because we don't know what the committees are doing. And education planners is in, they're out, you know, like we just don't know. And they're still kind of flubbing this and spitballing as they go, to, for lack of a better word. And based on this last meeting, it certainly still seems like school closure is a definite possibility. Just the decision is 2026 for the following year, which would be 27, 28. And that means, well, the one thing parents can't complain about is the lack of notice.
Well, that sounds like a problem for future Decatur, so we'll stick a pin in that. D asks, how does the district approve vendors, and are we still beholden to their recommendations? Jim or D? I mean, Jim or Jess? Either one of you can take that.
You got it. You got it.
So, well, and you may have to correct me, Jim, because at the time they were approved, the superintendent could basically unilaterally hire them because they were below the $100,000 threshold for a contract. I think their contract at the time, their scope of work was like 40 grand or something for this specific project. Interestingly enough, they also did work on ECLC and promoting ECLC right at the same time that they were working on this, based on their slides. So they were kind of putting their foot in both ends there. But the reality is, and I think, you know, in their last meeting, they may have changed it to $75,000. So this vendor would have been approved no matter what again. So there isn't a lot of board oversight depending on the dollar amount for vendors, and they just get hired. In terms of recommendations, I firmly believe if education planners had come back and said, based on our analysis, you should close a school, I think there's a decent chunk of board members at the time who would have been like, sounds like a great idea. You know, some of the board members may have had like, independently, I want to run the numbers myself, but I'm not sure.
Jim, is that your understanding of how the process works?
From how I understand it, yes. I believe anything under that 100K threshold right now is kind of, you know, like Jess said, unilaterally approved. Anything above is kind of board approval, kind of put in the agenda. Similar to how Decatur Schools works, but they made it a point of the point to change the policy. It's in first read, I believe. It's going into second read next month, so it'll be fully approved to go to 75,000. That was something that board member Tracy Anderson was trying to fight to 50.
Yeah, she pushed that.
But I mean, they made comparisons to other school districts that they call comparable to City Schools of Decatur. City Schools of Buford is one of them, and I believe Marietta City Schools is the other. City Schools of Buford, I believe, is at 15,000, and then Marietta is at 30, or it could be the other way around. But
yeah, they're relatively low compared to us.
Yeah, and that was kind of, and to be fair, I mean, I think Hans Utz had mentioned like that's a lot of work for those places, but you know, they do that, and that's kind of the comparable thing. So it kind of went past the board to be approved because of
so we're getting towards the end of our show, and I do want to be respectful of your time and our audience's time. Jess, real quick, what was your reaction to the school board chair's comments the other night, and what are the next steps for your group? Where do you go from here?
Yeah, so my reaction was I guess disappointment, right? It could have been a real opportunity to say, you know what, look, there's a lot of things we need a course correct. We need to start being more open with the community. Here's a good place to start, and you know, really open it up, and maybe show better understanding of where the community is coming from, instead of kind of treating us like, you know, we're uninformed, or we're taking things out of context, or we're hyperbolic. And so it very much seemed just very defensive. And I need to, you know, put this statement out there because I'm really upset and angry, and my feelings were hurt. And, you know, government officials that happens sometimes when people have to fight to protect things when it seems like government's acting arbitrary and capricious. So there's that aspect of it that was just disappointing, and there's a huge trust factor that they desperately need to work on, and the community would be willing to work on them with it, but the more they dig in and double down on everything, it's really hard to do that. It's really hard to engage in just a cooperative manner. So there's that with their comments, or the board chair's comments. In terms of what our group is looking at next, what are the committees going to ultimately be doing? There's a lot of us who are on the committees and willing, ready, and able to help in those capacities. I think, like I said, all of that's still being kind of fleshed out and trying to figure it out. There are, I know, other people who have done record requests, so there could be kind of more information that's lingering out there. And really just trying to advocate for our schools and our teachers, because I think that has been a silent voice in this for it feels like years now, but for the few months we've been working on it, is that the teachers, as we have learned in this process, need a voice and to be also part of these considerations. That's an important aspect of it too.
Jim, real quick, what are the next steps for CSD here?
New year. They're going into budget season soon, which we'll be looking at next year's budget. I know the bond is validated. I know it's kind of, they're not really saying what the status is right now because of litigation, because it was an illegal battle there for a second.
Real quick point, we are hearing that there's another PFA meeting that's required to fully validate the bond, but we haven't gotten all the details on that yet. We're going to firm that up, but we have heard there might be another PFA meeting involved, so we'll keep you posted if we learn more.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's really just, they're on that final step to get the ECLC into construction mode. It doesn't really seem like there's a date now set. It was supposed to be kind of the beginning of this year in December, and that kind of got moved and kind of delayed. So there's that, and also talking about the utilization study with K2, just waiting on what the committees have to say. A lot of data has got to come in. They got to evaluate that, kind of get back to the district and see how it goes from there, because I feel like that could be really who knows what's going to happen there. So.
Well, that is all the time we have for tonight. Jess, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Jim, thank you as well. I don't want to brag on Jim a little bit because he is doing the Lord's work, sitting through all these long Board of Education meetings. So the rest of y'all don't have to. And we really appreciate all the work you do for us, Jim. Thank you so much. If you missed tonight's episode, it'll be available as a podcast. Yes, we have a podcast via the App and Media Podcast Network. Be sure to join us again next Thursday at 7 p.m. for another episode of the Decatur Download. With that, we hope you all have a great weekend, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye, everybody.